So I talk to parents all the time in college recruiting who feel like they are missing something, right? They're doing a lot of the things that they've been told to do. They're not seeing progress. They're not seeing results. And they're like, I must be missing something, right? And then sometimes they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, Jack, I feel like I'm 70% of the way there, right? Like I feel like we're making some progress, but we're not at the finish line. And I really don't understand the last 30%. Here's the problem is that just because you might understand 70% of the process does not mean that you are 70% of the way there. Because in order for you to be 70% of the way there, you have to actually understand the last 30%. Otherwise, the 70% is kind of meaningless, right? Because you have to get all the way to the finish line to ultimately get interest and offers. You know, think about it this way. If you have 95% of a car built, like you've built pretty much the entire thing, right? But you don't have the steering wheel, you cannot drive that car. Like the car is not going to go anywhere. And so even though you've built 95% of the car, you have traveled the same distance as someone who has built 0% of the car, right? Which is just like a really hard pill to swallow, and it's really unfortunate, but it's the reality of the situation. You need the whole thing in order to actually cross the line and get the interest and offers that you're looking for your kid. So I put together this graphic in like 10 minutes, and hopefully this helps clarify this for you. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but I am going to show you when you're missing something, the implications of that, and how you can fix that and what that looks like. Okay, so for instance, let's go over here to email. Okay, so let's say that you come to me and you say, hey, Jack, we are currently emailing college coaches, and I feel pretty good about my ability to email college coaches is what you tell me. And you say, I know what to write. I know which coaches to email. I know how to get their contact info. And so you are pushing them to some sort of video because you have been watching my videos and you're like, that is what Jack says to do. So you push to some sort of video, but there's lots of different types of videos that you could push to. Right? You could push to a highlight video. You could push to an individual video. You could push to playlists. You could push to Twitter. You could push to Huddle. You could push to Sports Recruit. Like there's a billion different kinds of videos that you could push to. And let's say whatever video you're pushing to is not working and you're not able to generate any of those first conversations. The problem is that the buck stops there, right? You don't get the benefit of moving any further in the recruiting process, because ultimately what we're trying to do in this whole thing here is move down the process. This is scholarships and roster spots. This is zero interest, right? And so you are trying to go from zero interest to roster spots and scholarships. And so if you're not able to generate first conversations, you can't do any of this stuff right here, right? This would be interest builders and interest converters, where you're taking the interest that you've generated and then building it over time and then converting it into scholarships. So you can't do any of that if you can't get past the first conversations, right? And the problem with this, the thing that's really, really unfortunate, is that it doesn't just impact you early in the process, it also impacts you later. So what if you're really good at generating interest, but you're not good at converting it? You still get the same result as everyone else who can't even generate interest, right? You come to me and you say, hey, we're really good at generating interest. We've been able to get 5 college coaches interested. And I say, that's amazing. But the problem is that getting 5 interested schools is not the same thing as getting a scholarship, right? Or an opportunity. We have to actually do something with that interest to get coaches more interested. And so I turn to you and I say, awesome. So what are you doing to turn that interest into real scholarships? And you look at me like most parents and say, what do you mean? Because most parents think, okay, if a college coach shows interest in my kid, then they're going to call my kid, they're going to call my kid's coach, they're going to watch all our videos, they're going to keep up with our stats, they're going to track us. But the reality is, unless a college coach is just head over heels for your kid, that's not going to happen, right? They are not going to bear the entire burden of communication. They're going to expect you to bear some of that as well. And so when you don't do that because you're expecting all of those things to happen, then the relationship fizzles and you go back to square one, right? And you lose all of that interest. And so this is actually the most dangerous place to be. That was a terrible rectangle. This is the most dangerous place to be in college recruiting because you feel like you are making progress, but it's very easy to go back to zero because you generate interest and then you go back to zero because you don't know how to do anything with it. And you just continue doing this cycle until senior year. And then senior year rolls around and you're like, oh my gosh, we can't figure this out. I thought we understood, but we don't. And then you come to me and I say, okay, we'll try and do what we can, but there are significantly less roster spots and scholarships available now than a year or two ago, right? And so this is why this is a very dangerous place to be, because this is about 70% of the way there, right? Is generating that initial interest. And then also maybe that's more like 30 to 50%. This would be about 70%, which is where you're actually communicating with college coaches, but you don't have scholarships yet. So you have frequent communication, but you don't have scholarships yet. And so this is a very dangerous place to be, because you have the comfort of feeling like you're making progress, but you haven't built anything tangible yet. And so we have to be able to take that interest and turn it into scholarships. And this process right here often takes months, okay? Like it takes a lot of time. It's usually not immediate, but it depends on the sport that you play. It depends on how badly they want your kid. And it also depends on your kid's age, okay? So the point there is that you could be missing something, right? And you need the whole puzzle if you truly want the interest and offers that you're expecting from college coaches. Now let's look at this as well, because there's one other thing here that I want to talk about, which is these are the 4 ways that you can get interest from college coaches or get on college coaches' radars: email, Twitter, coach referrals, and recruiting events. And I've talked about this before. I'm not going to dive into it now because that's not the point of this video. So parents will come to me and they will say, Jack, help, please. We don't have any interest from college coaches. And I will say, okay, so tell me how you're currently generating interest right now, like how you're trying to get on coaches' radars. And they will say, well, we're emailing coaches. And I say, awesome. How many are you sending? And they say, well, we're sending about 20 to 30 emails, right? We're emailing 20 or 30 college coaches, which is about average. That's what most families tell me. Some families send more than that, but that's about average. And I say, okay. Then I say, so what are you doing on Twitter? And you say, well, I'm not on Twitter. I say, all right. Coach referrals is going to be about 3 to 5 referrals from your coach, okay? They're not going to make 50 calls on your behalf, simply because if they have a travel team, they have hundreds of players in their organization. They can't do it for all of them. Same for like a high school coach who might have dozens of players on a team, depending on what sport you play. So they're not going to make like 50 calls for you. You can expect 3 to 5 if you're lucky, okay? And then you have recruiting events, which are really not for exposure. They're really actually for evaluation. And so you can expect something like 1 to 5 interested schools from recruiting events. Now, if you're a top 10% player, it's going to be way more. If you are not a top 10% player, that number might be a big fat 0, okay? So my point is that you are not going to get mass exposure from coach referrals. You're not going to get mass exposure from recruiting events. And so when we look at the 4 ways that you're going to generate interest in the process, you have 1 of 4 of them, which basically means like, yeah, you're probably not going to get a ton of interest, right? And then the other thing is the one thing that you are doing, 20 to 30, is probably about, again, a quarter of the amount of volume that you should do if you really want to get any traction. And so you're doing a quarter of kind of what needs to be done in order to generate interest. And all of a sudden you go, oh, so that's why we don't have any interest in college recruiting. And this is sort of how the process breaks down, okay? So what we're gonna do is like I said, we're moving from the top down. So ultimately, you have 0 interest here and you have scholarships down here, and you are trying to move this way. Now there's 3 pieces to this process, okay? We're gonna break this up into 3 ways. This right here is what's called interest generators, okay? This is where you don't have any interest, and then all of a sudden you get on college coaches' radars and they learn that your kid exists. Now, just like we talked about, you can generate interest, but never actually get any scholarship offers or roster spots. So we have to do the next step, which is this piece right here, and this is interest builders. We need to take the interest that you have and grow it over time so that they grow in confidence that your kid really is a good player and the perfect fit for their team. And then once we reach a certain threshold, it's time to do the last piece here, which is interest converters. We're going to take the interest that we have and we're going to finally turn it into the scholarship offers that we want. So we have these 3 pieces right here. And now, if those are the 3 pieces, that means that this is 33% of the process, this is 33% of the process, and these converters are 33% of the process, right? So if you know how to generate interest and you know how to build interest, then you understand 66% of the process, which is very similar to this 70% right here. The problem is that you do not know how to convert interest. So even though you understand 66% of the process, you will not get scholarship offers, okay? So what if this looks like something a little bit different though, right? What if you understand how to build interest, and you even understand how to convert interest, but you don't get any interest generation. The problem is you have no traffic pushing into the things that you actually know how to do. So also these scholarships, nope, you're not going to get these either, right? And so the whole point is that you need all three pieces if you actually want to get interest and offers in college recruiting. And that's why when you say, hey, I'm 70% of the way there, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't really matter because 70% is not going to get you scholarships. It's just not going to. You have to understand 100% of the process. And if you understand 100% of the process, then you are significantly more likely, as long as your kid has talent and you have reasonable expectations, you're significantly more likely to get the scholarships and roster spots that you're looking for. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. I'll leave some resources down in the description, and I'll see you guys next time.